Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to learn one of the most useful grammar structures in English, noun clauses. If you want to speak more naturally, write better essays, or achieve a higher score on English proficiency tests, understanding noun clauses is essential. Native speakers use noun clauses every day without even realizing it. Whenever they explain an idea, report information, express an opinion, or ask an indirect question, they often use a noun clause. By the end of today's lesson, you'll understand what noun clauses are, how they are formed, where they are used, and how they can sometimes be simplified using infinitive structures. We will also look at many real-life examples so that you can confidently use noun clauses in your speaking and writing. What is a noun clause? Before we learn about noun clauses, let's first remember what a noun does. A noun is a word that names a person, place, thing, or idea. In a sentence, a noun can function as the subject, the object, or the complement. A noun clause performs exactly the same grammatical functions, but instead of being a single word, it is an entire clause containing its own subject and verb. Because it is a dependent clause, it cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. Instead, it depends on another clause to complete its meaning. For example, consider the sentence, I know that she is honest. The words that she is honest form a noun clause. Although it contains a subject, she, and a verb, is, it cannot stand alone because it begins with that. In this sentence, the noun clause functions as the object of the verb know. The speaker is explaining what he or she knows. Now look at another example. What he said surprised everyone. Here, what he said is the noun clause. Instead of acting as an object, it functions as the subject of the sentence because it performs the action of surprising everyone. This example reminds us that a noun clause can appear in different positions depending on its grammatical function. How can we recognize a noun clause? When identifying a noun clause, ask yourself two questions. First, does this group of words contain its own subject and verb? Second, does the entire group function as a noun? If the answer to both questions is yes, then it is a noun clause. For example, in the sentence she explained why she was late, the words why she was late contain the subject she and the verb was, and together they function as the object of the verb explained. Therefore, they form a noun clause. Functions of noun clauses. One important characteristic of noun clauses is that they can perform all the major functions of a noun. The first function is acting as the subject of a sentence. In this case, the noun clause comes before the main verb. Consider the sentence. What you do today affects your future. Here, what you do today is the subject because it tells us what affects our future. Likewise, in the sentence whether they agree doesn't matter, the clause whether they agree serves as the subject. Although these structures are grammatically correct, they are more common in formal writing than in casual conversation. In everyday speech, English speakers often begin with it instead. For example, it doesn't matter whether they agree. Both sentences have the same meaning, but the second sounds more natural in conversation. The second and most common function of a noun clause is acting as the object of a verb. This is the structure that English learners use most frequently. For example, I think that English is important. She knows where he lives. We don't understand why the machine stopped. They remembered what the teacher said. Notice that each noun clause answers the question, what? After the main verb. What do I think? That English is important. What does she know? Where he lives. These clauses provide the information required by the verb. The third function is serving as a subject complement, which means the noun clause follows a linking verb such as be, seem, or become. For example, the problem is that we don't have enough time. The truth is that nobody told us. My concern is whether the project will succeed. In these examples, the noun clause explains or identifies the subject. Finally, noun clauses can also function as the object of a preposition, although this is generally limited to WH clauses and weather clauses. For example, everything depends on whether it rains tomorrow. I'm interested in what you think. Notice that after a preposition such as on, about, or in, we normally use whether instead of if. Types of noun clauses. There are three major types of noun clauses that you must master. The first type is the that clause. A that clause is used to report facts, opinions, beliefs, or statements. For example, I believe that education changes lives. She admitted that she had made a mistake. Scientists discovered that the medicine was effective. In everyday conversation, the word that is often omitted. Instead of saying, I think that he is right, native speakers often say, I think he is right. Both forms are correct, but omitting that is much more common in spoken English. The second type is the WH clause, which begins with question words such as what, who, where, when, why, or how. For example, tell me what happened. I know where she lives. Nobody understands why he left. She explained how the system works. Students often make one important mistake here. Remember that noun clauses are not questions. Therefore, they follow statement word order, not question word order. The question is, where does she live? The noun clause becomes, I know where she lives. Notice that we do not say, I know where does she live. This is one of the most common grammar mistakes among English learners. The third type is the whether/if clause, which introduces indirect yes or no questions. For example, I don't know whether he will come. She asked if I needed help. We are discussing whether we should postpone the meeting. Although if and whether often have the same meaning, whether is more formal and must be used after prepositions. For example, everything depends on whether they agree. Using if after a preposition is considered incorrect. Noun clauses in real-life communication. Noun clauses are everywhere in everyday English. Imagine you are talking with a friend. Your friend asks, why are you worried? You might reply, I'm worried because I don't know whether I'll pass the exam. Or perhaps your teacher asks, can anyone explain the answer? A student might respond, I think that the answer is C because the author supports that idea in the passage. At work, a manager may ask, can you tell me what happened during yesterday's meeting? Notice how noun clauses allow us to report information politely and naturally without asking direct questions. Reducing noun clauses. Now, let's discuss an advanced grammar point that many students find confusing. Unlike adjective clauses and adverb clauses, noun clauses generally cannot be reduced by simply removing the subject or verb. This is because the subject and verb are necessary for the noun clause to function correctly. However, there is one very common structure that serves a similar purpose, WH word plus to infinitive. This structure is often called an infinitive noun phrase, and it expresses the same basic meaning as a longer noun clause when the subject is understood. Consider this sentence. I don't know how I should solve this problem. Because the subject of the noun clause refers to the same person as the subject of the main clause, we can simplify the sentence. I don't know how to solve this problem. The meaning remains almost identical, but the second sentence is shorter and sounds more natural. Let's look at more examples. She showed me where I could park my car. Becomes, she showed me where to park my car. Another example is, please tell me what I should do next, which becomes, please tell me what to do next. Similarly, he hasn't decided whether he should accept the job. Becomes, he hasn't decided whether to accept the job. These reduced forms are extremely common in both spoken and written English. Whenever the subject of the noun clause is understood or shared with the main clause, English speakers often prefer the infinitive form because it is shorter and more efficient. Common mistakes. Before we finish, let's review several mistakes that English learners frequently make. The first mistake is using question word order inside a noun clause. Incorrect. I know where does she live. Correct. I know where she lives. Always remember that noun clauses follow statement word order. The second mistake is using if after a preposition. Incorrect. It depends on if he comes. Correct. It depends on whether he comes. The third mistake is trying to reduce every noun clause. Remember that only certain WH clauses can naturally become WH word plus to infinitive structures. Most that clauses cannot be reduced in this way. Conclusion. To conclude today's lesson, remember that a noun clause is simply a dependent clause that functions as a noun. It can serve as the subject, object, complement, or object of a preposition. The three main types of noun clauses are that clauses, WH clauses, and whether/if clauses. One of the most important grammar rules is that noun clauses always use statement word order, even when they begin with a question word. Finally, while noun clauses usually cannot be reduced in the same way as adjective or adverb clauses, many WH clauses can be simplified into WH word plus to infinitive forms, such as what to do, where to go, or how to solve the problem. The best way to master noun clauses is to notice how native speakers use them in conversations, books, articles, and videos. Every time you encounter expressions such as I think that, I know where, or can you tell me how, pay attention to the noun clause. With regular practice, you will naturally begin using these structures in your own speaking and writing, making your English sound more fluent, more accurate, and much more academic.